The galaxy changed on a quiet morning when nobody was expecting it. Across 7 star systems, billions of beings were doing their normal daily things. Some were eating breakfast. Some were going to work. Some were sleeping in their beds. Then every screen in every home, every ship, and every station lit up with the same emergency broadcast. The Coalition Network had never sent an alert like this before. It was not a war announcement. It was not a natural disaster. It was simply a video file marked as urgent content from a small border outpost that most beings had never heard of. Ambassador Yulri was sitting in her office on the Terran diplomatic station when the alert came through. She was a woman of 53 years, with gray hair she refused to dye and eyes that had seen too many political games. Her morning had been boring until that moment. She was reading trade documents and drinking her 3rd cup of coffee. Her aide Daesu ran into the room without knocking. This was strange because Daesu was a very polite young man who always knocked 3 times before entering. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. "Ma'am," he said, breathing hard like he had been running. "You need to see this right now. The Vreen have released combat footage from Kepler 447b. It is Sergeant Han." Yulri put down her coffee cup. She knew that name. Everyone in the Terran military knew that name. Sergeant Han Teo was not famous for being a hero. He was famous for being a problem. A good soldier who could not follow orders when those orders felt wrong to him. She turned to her wall screen and pressed play. The video was not high quality. It came from a security camera in what looked like a market square. Buildings were burning around the edges of the frame. Smoke filled the air. Bodies of different species lay on the ground, though it was hard to tell if they were dead or just hurt. In the center of the square stood a single human male. He was not a big man. Average height, average build. His military uniform was torn and covered in dust and blood. Some of the blood was his own. Some was not. He stood very still, like a statue, while chaos burned around him. But it was what he held that made Yulri stop breathing. In his left arm, pressed tight against his chest, like the most precious thing in the universe, was a small creature covered in soft golden fur. It was a Pelori cub. Yulri had seen pictures of them before. They looked like a mix between a cat and a small bear, with huge round eyes and tiny paws. This one was young, very young, maybe 5 or 6 cycles old, which meant it was basically a baby. The cub was holding onto the human's vest with its little claws. Its face was buried against his neck. Its whole body was shaking with fear. Around the human and the cub stood 12 Vreen soldiers. The Vreen were not a species that most beings wanted to fight. They stood over 2 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in natural armor that grew from their own skin, hard and black like beetle shells. They had 4 arms each, and every arm held a weapon. They were soldiers born for war, and they had surrounded this single human in a perfect circle. There was no escape, no backup coming, no hope. The Vreen commander stepped forward. He was bigger than the others, with red markings on his chest armor that showed his rank. When he spoke, his voice was like rocks grinding together. "Surrender the creature, Terran. It is property of the Vreen Dominion. You have no claim here. Give it to us, and you may leave with your life." The human did not move, did not speak. He just stood there holding the cub, his right hand hanging empty at his side. "This is your final warning," the commander continued. "That animal belongs to us. It has already been sold. The buyer is waiting. You are interfering with legal commerce." Still, the human said nothing. One of the Vreen soldiers laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Look at him. He is frozen with fear. Humans are all the same. They talk big, but when they face real warriors, they become cowards." "Maybe he has lost his mind," another soldier said. "Maybe he thinks that if he stands still enough, we will not see him." More laughter from the circle of soldiers. The commander raised one of his 4 hands to signal his troops. "Enough games. Kill him and take the merchandise. We have wasted enough time." That was when the human finally moved. He shifted his weight just a little bit. He adjusted his hold on the cub, making sure its head was tucked safely below his chin. He rolled his shoulders like a man preparing for a long day of work, and then he smiled. Across the galaxy, Billions of beings watched that smile appear on the human's face. It was not a happy smile. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made something old and primitive wake up in the back of every viewer's brain. The part that remembered what it meant to be prey. The Vreen did not understand. They had never fought humans before. They did not know what that smile meant. But everyone watching the broadcast knew. Humans had spread across the galaxy for 300 years. Their reputation was complicated. They were traders and diplomats and scientists and artists. They were friendly and curious and sometimes very foolish. They were also, when pushed far enough, absolutely terrifying. "I am only going to say this once," the human said. His voice was calm and quiet, like he was discussing the weather. "This child is under my protection. I am going to walk out of this square with her. Anyone who tries to stop me is going to die. There will be no second warning. There will be no mercy. I want you to understand that very clearly before you make your choice." The Vreen commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. "One human against 12 Vreen warriors? You are insane." "Probably," the human agreed. "But that does not change anything. The child stays with me. It is just an animal. A piece of property. Why would you die for livestock?" The human's smile faded. Something else replaced it, something cold and hard and ancient. "She is not an animal," he said softly. "She is a little girl who is scared and wants her mother. And I am going to take her home." The commander gave the signal to attack. 12 Vreen soldiers moved as one, their weapons raised, their battle cries filling the air. The human moved too, and the galaxy watched. On the Pelori homeworld, millions of beings gathered around screens and held their breath. They knew that cub. They knew what it meant that a human was standing between their child and the monsters who had taken her. On Earth, humans stopped what they were doing and stared at their screens with a strange mix of pride and fear. They knew what their kind was capable of. They knew what was about to happen. On 100 different worlds, military leaders began recording the footage for later study. They had heard stories about humans in combat. Now they were about to see the truth. Ambassador Yulri watched with her hand over her mouth, unable to look away. "What is he doing?" Desu whispered. "He cannot possibly win. There are 12 of them." Yulri did not answer. She was watching the human's right hand. The one that was not holding the child. The one that was now moving toward the first Vreen soldier with the smooth, practiced motion of someone who had done this many times before. She knew what Desu did not know. She had read Sergeant Han's file. She knew his history. She knew what he had done in the war against the Keth. She knew why he had been reprimanded twice for excessive personal initiative. She knew that 12 soldiers were not nearly enough. "He is not trying to win," she said quietly. "He is trying to send a message." On the screen, the first Vreen soldier fell. Then the second. Then the third. The galaxy watched. And the galaxy began to understand. 3 days before the video was recorded, Sergeant Han Teo was sitting alone in a bar on Orbital Station 9. The bar was called the Rusty Anchor, and it was the kind of place where soldiers went when they did not want to talk to anyone. The lights were dim. The music was quiet. The drinks were strong. Teo liked it here because nobody asked questions and nobody cared about ranks or medals or history. He was 42 years old. His hair was starting to turn gray at the edges. His face had the kind of lines that come from too many years of squinting at distant enemies. His hands were rough and covered in small scars that told stories he never shared. He was drinking alone and thinking about nothing when his communicator buzzed. The message was simple. "Colonel Park wants to see you. Now." Teo finished his drink slowly. He was in no hurry. Colonel Park Ji-yun was his commanding officer, and she was a good leader. But meetings with her usually meant trouble. The good kind of trouble or the bad kind, but always trouble. He paid for his drink and walked through the station's long corridors until he reached the military section. The guards at the door scanned his identification and let him through without comment. Everyone on the station knew who he was. Everyone had opinions about him. He did not care about any of those opinions. Colonel Park's office was neat and organized, just like the woman herself. She was 50 years old with short black hair and a face that rarely smiled. She had served in 3 wars and lost her left arm in the second one. The replacement arm was military grade, stronger than the original, but she never talked about it. "Sit down, Sergeant," she said when he entered. "Close the door." Teo sat in the chair across from her desk and waited. He had learned long ago that the best way to deal with officers was to say nothing until they told you what they wanted. Ji-yun studied him for a long moment. Then she pushed a datapad across her desk toward him. "What do you know about the Pelori?" she asked. Teo picked up the datapad and looked at the images on the screen. Small, furry creatures with big eyes. They looked gentle and harmless. "Not much," he admitted. "They are a minor species, live on a few worlds in the outer systems, peaceful, keep to themselves." "That is correct. They are also classified as non-sentient fauna by the Coalition Council." Teo looked up from the datapad. "Non-sentient? But they have cities, technology, language." "They do. But 20 years ago, when they applied for Coalition membership, the Vreen Dominion blocked their application. The Vreen claimed that the Pelori failed the standard intelligence tests, that their language was just mimicry, like birds copying sounds, that their cities were built by instinct, like insect hives. That is ridiculous." "Yes, it is. But the Vreen had political power and the Pelori did not." The motion passed. "Officially, the Pelori are animals, property. They have no rights under Coalition law." Ji-yun's voice was flat and cold, but Teo could see the anger in her eyes. She was a soldier, not a politician, and she hated political games. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Ji-yun tapped the datapad in his hands. "Scroll down." Teo scrolled. The images changed. He saw cages, small bodies packed together like cargo, eyes that were empty and hopeless, cubs being loaded onto transport ships, adults being separated from their children, screaming in a language that the Coalition said was not real language. His hands tightened on the datapad until his knuckles turned white. "Trafficking," Ji-yun said. "The Vreen have been selling Pelori cubs to collectors across the galaxy for 15 years. Rich beings who want exotic pets. The cubs are taken from their families, shipped in containers like products, and sold to the highest bidder. If they die during transport, they are listed as damaged goods and discarded." Teo said nothing. His jaw was clenched so tight that his teeth hurt. 2 weeks ago, a Pelori female managed to get a message to our embassy. Her name is Yuna. Her daughter Miru was taken by Vreen traffickers 6 days ago. She is being held at a facility on Kepler 447b until transport arrives to take her to a buyer in the Outer Rim. What does she want from us? She wants her daughter back. She is begging for someone, anyone, to help her. She said she will give anything, do anything. She just wants to hold her child again. Ji-yun stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars filled the darkness like scattered diamonds. "I brought this to command," she continued. "I asked for permission to send a rescue team. I was denied. The Vreen are Coalition members. The Pelori are legally classified as property. Any military action against the Vreen would be considered an act of war. So we do nothing? Officially, yes, we do nothing. We let a child be sold like furniture because paperwork says she is not really a child." She turned back to face him. Her eyes were hard, but there was something else there too. Something that looked like hope. "Unofficially, I noticed that you have accumulated 6 weeks of personal leave time. I also noticed that civilian transport ships pass through the Kepler sector regularly. I thought you might want to take a vacation." Teo understood. This was not an order. It could not be an order. If he went to Kepler 447b and something went wrong, the military would deny any involvement. He would be alone. No backup. No support. No rescue. "The facility where they are holding the cub," he said. "What kind of security?" "Heavy. At least 50 Vreen soldiers on site at any time. Automated defense systems. Energy barriers. It is a fortress. 50 soldiers. Yes. And you would be one man, without official weapons or equipment, trying to extract a single target from the center of a heavily defended compound. It was suicide. They both knew it. The odds were impossible. Teo thought about his daughter back on Earth. Subin was 7 years old. She had her mother's smile and her father's stubborn streak. Every night before bed, she made him promise to come home safe. Every night, he made that promise, even though he knew he might not be able to keep it. He thought about what he would want if someone took Subin. If someone put his daughter in a cage and called her an animal. If someone was going to sell his little girl to strangers in a distant part of the galaxy, he would want someone to come. Anyone. He would pray to every god he had ever heard of for someone to help. The mother, he said slowly. Yuna. Did she say anything else? Ji Yun's expression softened just a little. She said her daughter's name is Miru. She said to tell whoever came that Miru is afraid of loud noises, that she likes to be held close when she is scared, that she has a small mark shaped like a star on her left ear. A mother describing her child, hoping that those small details might matter to someone, hoping that knowing her daughter was real, was special, was loved, might make a stranger care enough to help. Teo stood up. He placed the datapad carefully on Ji Yun's desk. I think I will take that vacation, he said. The Kepler sector is supposed to be nice this time of year. Ji Yun nodded slowly. She did not say thank you. She did not say good luck. She just looked at him with something like respect. There is a civilian transport leaving in 3 hours. I took the liberty of booking you a seat. Your gear is waiting in storage locker 7C. I do not know how it got there. Teo almost smiled. Almost. Colonel, if I do not come back, I will make sure Subin knows her father was a good man. That was enough. That was more than enough. Teo walked out of the office and headed toward the transport bay. 3 hours until departure. 3 days until he reached Kepler 447b. And somewhere on that distant world, a little girl named Miru was waiting in a cage, afraid of loud noises, not understanding why no one was coming to help her. He walked a little faster. He was coming. He was going to find her. And whatever stood in his way was going to learn what happened when humans decided to protect something small and scared and precious. The galaxy was about to receive a lesson it would never forget. The footage that would become the most watched recording in Coalition history lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. It would be studied by military academies on 300 different worlds. Experts would slow it down frame by frame, analyzing every movement, every decision, every impossible moment. They would write papers about it. They would argue about it. They would try to explain how one human did what the video showed him doing. None of them would ever fully understand. The recording began with Sergeant Han standing motionless in the center of the burning market square. Around him, the 12 Vreen soldiers had formed a perfect circle. Their weapons were raised, their bodies were tensed for combat. They were professionals, trained from birth for war, and they had executed this kind of formation 1,000 times before. They expected the fight to last seconds. 1 human against 12 Vreen warriors. It was not even a contest. It was an execution. The cub in Han's left arm was trembling so hard that viewers could see her fur shaking. Her face was pressed against the human's neck. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Her tiny paws gripped his vest like she was afraid of falling into darkness. Han's right hand hung at his side, empty, relaxed, waiting. The Vreen commander gave the signal. 12 soldiers attacked at once. What happened next was difficult to follow even in slow motion. Han moved like water flowing around stones, like smoke curling through fingers, like something that was not quite human anymore. The first Vreen to reach him was the biggest one, a soldier with massive arms and a pulse lance that could cut through starship armor. He swung the weapon at Han's back, expecting an easy kill. Han was not there anymore. He had spun to the side, his body curling around the cub like a protective shell. The pulse lance missed by centimeters, but Han's right hand did not miss. It found the gap between the Vreen's neck armor and his helmet, and it squeezed. The soldier dropped. The second Vreen came from the left, all 4 arms swinging different weapons. Han ducked under the first strike, deflected the second with his forearm, ignored the third as it scraped across his back and drove his elbow into the soldier's throat. The soldier dropped. Through all of this, Han never stopped holding the cub. His left arm stayed locked around her small body, keeping her pressed against his chest. He took hits that should have knocked him down because moving would have exposed her. He let blades cut his flesh because dodging would have put her in danger. His blood splattered across the ground. His uniform tore. His body accumulated damage that would have stopped most beings. He did not stop. The third Vreen tried to grab the cub directly. His 4 hands reached for the small, furry body, trying to tear her away from the human's grip. Something changed in Han's face. The footage quality was not good enough to capture exactly what that change looked like, but witnesses who watched the video described it the same way. One moment, Han was a soldier fighting for survival. The next moment, he was something else. Something older. Something that lived in the deep parts of human history, back when they were small and soft and surrounded by predators much larger than themselves. Back when protecting their young was the only thing that mattered. Han's right hand moved so fast that the camera could barely track it. The Vreen, who had reached for Miru, flew backward through the air, crashed into a stone wall, and did not get up again. 9 soldiers left. They attacked together, abandoning their formation, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. Weapons came from every direction. Blades and clubs and energy weapons filled the air around the human like a storm of death. Han walked through it. He walked through the storm of weapons like it was nothing more than rain. His right hand was constantly moving, blocking, striking, breaking. Every motion was precise. Every movement had a purpose. Nothing was wasted. And through it all, his lips were moving. The original footage had poor audio. The sounds of combat drowned out everything else. But 3 days after the video was released, a team of audio experts managed to isolate and enhance the human's voice. What they found made billions of beings across the galaxy stop and stare at their screens in stunned silence. Han was singing. It was an old Earth lullaby, the kind that human parents had sung to their children for hundreds of years. The words were simple and gentle, about stars and dreams and being safe in the dark. He was singing to the cub, while his right hand broke bones and ended lives. While his body absorbed punishment that should have killed him 3 times over. While 12 trained killers tried their best to destroy him, Han kept his voice soft and steady. He sang to the frightened child in his arms like nothing else in the universe existed. Hush, little one, the stars are bright. Close your eyes and hold on tight. Morning comes with golden light. Hush, little one, everything is all right. The 8th Vreen fell. Then the 9th. By now, the remaining 3 soldiers had realized something terrible. They were not fighting a normal human. They were not even fighting a soldier. They were fighting something that had decided it was not going to die until the child in its arms was safe, and nothing they did could change that decision. One of them tried to run. Han caught him before he took 3 steps. The last 2 soldiers attacked together in a final desperate charge. One of them managed to drive a blade deep into Han's side. The other hit him across the face hard enough to break bone. Han did not fall. He did not even slow down. His right hand found one throat, then the other. The last soldier dropped. Silence fell over the market square. The fires still burned. The smoke still rose. But the fighting was over. Han stood alone among the bodies of 12 Vreen warriors. His face was covered in blood, some his own and some not. His body was broken in at least a dozen places. His breathing was ragged and wet, suggesting internal damage that would need immediate medical attention. But the cub in his arms was untouched. Not a single drop of blood had reached her golden fur. Not a single blow had landed on her small body. He had taken everything. All the damage. All the pain. All the violence. He had absorbed it all so she would not have to feel any of it. Slowly, carefully, Han loosened his grip on the cub just enough to look down at her face. Miru's eyes were still closed. Her trembling had stopped. The lullaby had worked. Somehow, impossibly, surrounded by death and fire and chaos, the little girl had fallen asleep. She was safe. She was unharmed. She was going home. Han's legs finally gave out. He dropped to his knees in the blood-soaked square, still holding the sleeping cub against his chest. His vision was going dark around the edges. His body was shutting down from damage and blood loss. But he was smiling. In the distance, he could hear sirens approaching. Pelori emergency responders who had been hiding during the fight, waiting for it to end. They would find him soon. They would get Miru to safety. They would contact her mother. That was enough. Han closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. The last image on the footage, the image that would become famous across 300 worlds, showed a broken human kneeling in a burning square, holding a sleeping child like she was the most precious thing in the universe. Because to him, in that moment, she was. The video spread across Coalition space faster than any broadcast in history. Within 1 hour, it had been viewed over 2 billion times. Within 6 hours, that number had reached 50 billion. By the end of the first day, there was not a single inhabited world in the galaxy where someone had not seen the footage of one human fighting 12 soldiers with a child in his arms. The reactions were as varied as the species watching. On the Pelori homeworld, millions gathered in the streets. They did not speak. They did not cheer. They simply stood together in silence, watching the video play on massive screens in every city center. Many of them were crying. For the first time in 20 years, someone from another species had looked at one of their children and seen a child. Not an animal, not property, not a product to be bought and sold. A child. Worth protecting. Worth dying for. Elder Bami addressed her people from the steps of the Great Hall in the capital city. She was very old, over 90 cycles, and she had served on the Coalition Council for 60 of those years. She had spent decades fighting for her people's rights, submitting petition after petition, only to be ignored and dismissed. Her voice shook as she spoke, but not from weakness. "We asked for help," she said. "For 20 years, we screamed into the darkness. We begged the galaxy to see our children as children. We pleaded with every species that would listen. And we were told that our grief was not real, that our love was just instinct, that we were animals who could not truly understand what was being taken from us." She paused. Tears ran down her aged face. One human heard us. One human looked at our cub and saw what we have always known, that our children feel fear, that they need protection, that they deserve to be held and loved and kept safe from harm. Her voice grew stronger. The galaxy called us animals. But today, an animal would not cross light years to save a stranger's child. An animal would not fight 12 warriors with one arm while singing lullabies. An animal would not sacrifice everything for something that was not its own blood. She raised her head high. The human showed us what we are, and the human showed the galaxy what it is. Who are the real animals here? The beings who sell children? Or the beings who die to save them? The crowd erupted in the first sounds they had made since gathering. It was not cheering. It was something deeper. A sound of hope finally breaking free after being locked away for too long. On the Vreen homeworld, the reaction was very different. The Dominion Council met in emergency session. Commander Rethkal, the highest-ranking military officer in the Vreen forces, stood before his government with barely contained rage. "This human has killed 12 of our soldiers," he declared. "He has destroyed government property. He has violated 17 coalition laws. He must be arrested, tried, and executed as an example." He projected the video onto the council chamber walls. "Look at this. One human. One soft, weak, pathetic human. He made our warriors look like fools. He humiliated us in front of the entire galaxy. We demand justice. We demand the Terran government hand over this criminal immediately." The Vreen ambassador to the coalition was dispatched within the hour. His demands were clear. Surrender the human called Han Teo, or face consequences. Ambassador Yul Ri received the communication in her office on the Terran diplomatic station. She read the demands carefully. Then she read them again. Then she set them aside and composed her response. Her reply was broadcast across every coalition channel, ensuring that the entire galaxy could hear it. The Terran government acknowledges that Sergeant Han Teo acted outside official military parameters, she said calmly. He was on personal leave at the time of the incident. His actions were his own choice and were not ordered or sanctioned by Terran command. The Vreen ambassador smiled, thinking he had won. Yul-Ri continued. However, we must also note certain facts that complicate this matter. Under Terran law, no child of any species can be classified as property. This is not negotiable. It is the foundation of everything we believe. Her voice hardened. Furthermore, under Terran law, any Terran citizen who witnesses the trafficking of children is legally and morally obligated to intervene. Failure to act is itself a crime. Sergeant Han did not break our laws. He followed them. The Vreen ambassador's smile faded. Finally, we wish to inform the Coalition that Terran investigators have recovered extensive data from the facility on Kepler 447b. This data includes records of over 3,000 Pelori cubs sold to buyers across the galaxy over the past 15 years. It includes names of buyers, transportation routes, and financial transactions. Yul-Ri leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. We will be sharing this information with the Coalition Court of Justice. We will be requesting a full investigation into Vreen trafficking operations. We will be demanding that the Pelori classification as non-sentient fauna be reviewed and reversed. She folded her hands on her desk. You may file your complaints against Sergeant Han. We will file ours against your government. I suspect the court proceedings will be educational for everyone involved. I look forward to seeing which case the galaxy finds more compelling. 12 soldiers killed in combat, or 3,000 children sold like furniture. The broadcast ended. Across the Coalition, species that had never paid attention to human politics suddenly found themselves very interested. The Terrans had always been strange. Soft bodies, short lives, emotional to the point of foolishness, but now the galaxy was seeing something else. Humans did not just follow rules, they followed something deeper. Something they called principles. And when those principles were violated, they did not care about politics or consequences or laws written by distant councils. They cared about what was right. On Earth, the reaction was complicated. Many humans celebrated Han as a hero. His face appeared on news broadcasts, his story told and retold until it became almost mythical. Parents looked at their children and imagined what they would do if someone tried to take them. The answer was always the same: anything. But others worried. Han's actions had created a diplomatic crisis. The Vreen were powerful, and they did not forgive easily. War was possible. Trade disruptions were certain. The comfortable peace that Earth had enjoyed for decades might be coming to an end. Han himself was unaware of any of this. He had been evacuated from Kepler 447b by Pelori medical teams and transferred to a Terran hospital ship. For 3 days, he floated in a regeneration tank while doctors worked to repair his shattered body. 47 broken bones, internal bleeding in 6 different organs, nerve damage in both arms, a skull fracture that should have killed him. The medical team could not understand how he had kept fighting, kept standing, kept singing, with so much damage to his body. One of the doctors, a young woman named Hannah, asked him about it when he finally woke up. The cub, he said. His voice was weak and rough. Is she safe? She is with her mother. They are both waiting to see you. Han closed his eyes. Something that looked like peace settled over his broken face. Then it was worth it, he said quietly. All of it, it was worth it. Hannah did not ask any more questions. Some things did not need to be explained. Some things were simply understood. Outside the hospital ship, the galaxy continued to argue about laws and politics and proper procedures. But inside that small room, a broken man smiled because somewhere a little girl was holding her mother again. That was the only thing that mattered. That had always been the only thing that mattered. Everything else was just noise. The transport ship carrying Sergeant Han landed on the Pelori homeworld on a morning when both suns were rising together. This happened only once every 30 cycles, and the Pelori considered it a sign of great importance. They called it the Double Dawn. a time when new beginnings were blessed by the universe itself. That the human who had saved one of their children would arrive on such a morning seemed like more than coincidence. It seemed like fate. A crowd had gathered at the landing site. Not hundreds, not thousands, millions. They had come from every city, every village, every corner of the planet. They filled the fields around the landing pad and spilled out onto the roads that led to the capital. They climbed trees and buildings and hills just to see the ship descending through the golden sky. And they were completely silent. The Pelori did not cheer or shout or make noise when they gathered for important moments. They believed that silence was the highest form of respect, a way of saying that no words could express what they felt. So they stood together, millions of small, furry bodies with their large eyes fixed on the sky, and they waited without making a sound. Han had not wanted this. He had asked, repeatedly, to land somewhere private, somewhere away from attention. He was not a hero, he told them. He was just a soldier who did what needed to be done. He did not deserve ceremonies or crowds or anything more than a quiet corner to recover in peace. The Pelori had gently but firmly refused. You do not understand what you did, Elder Bom Yi had told him through the communication screen. You do not understand what you gave us. Please, let us show you. Let us thank you the only way we know how. So Han had agreed, against his better judgment. And now he was walking down the ramp of the transport ship, blinking in the double sunlight, staring at more beings than he had ever seen gathered in one place before. His left arm was still in a sling. His face still showed the fading marks of his injuries. He walked slowly, carefully, like a man who knew that his body was held together more by stubbornness than by medicine. But he was not carrying anyone this time. His arms were empty, because Miru was not in his arms anymore. She was walking beside him. The little cub held onto two of his fingers with her small paw. She looked up at him with her huge round eyes, then looked out at the crowd, then looked back at him again. She was nervous about so many people, so much attention, but she was not afraid. She was safe. She knew she was safe. The human beside her had proven that nothing in the universe could hurt her while he was there. The crowd parted as they walked. Millions of Pelori stepped back to create a path, and at the end of that path stood a single figure. Yuna. Miru's mother had not slept in days. She had waited at the medical facility while the humans worked to save Han's life. She had waited at the spaceport for news of when they would arrive. She had waited here, at the front of the crowd, since before the first sun rose. She had been waiting for her daughter for so long. And now, finally, the waiting was over. Miru saw her mother. Her grip on Han's fingers loosened. Her eyes went wide. "Mama," she said. Her voice was small and high and full of everything a child feels when they see the person they love most in the world. Then she ran. She ran across the open ground, her little legs pumping as fast as they could, her golden fur catching the light of both suns. She ran like nothing else existed except the arms that were opening to catch her. Yuna dropped to her knees and caught her daughter. She pulled Miru against her chest and held on like she would never let go again. Her whole body shook with sobs that had been building for weeks. Sounds came from her throat that were not words, not in any language, just the raw voice of a mother who had finally gotten her child back. The crowd watched. Millions of beings saw one mother hold one child, and every single one of them felt something ancient and powerful move through their hearts. Han stood apart from the reunion. He did not approach. He did not speak. He just watched with an expression that was hard to read. Tired, yes. In pain, certainly. But something else too. Something that looked like satisfaction. Like completeness. Like a man who had finished the most important job of his life. Elder Bom Yi walked over to him. She was shorter than him by a full head, small and old and fragile looking. But her eyes held the wisdom of 90 years and the strength of someone who had never stopped fighting for her people. "Sergeant Han," she said, "the Pelori people owe you a debt that cannot be repaid. You risked everything. You nearly died. For a child you had never met, from a species you barely knew. Why?" Han was quiet for a long moment. He watched Miru and Yuna, still holding each other, still crying together. I have a daughter on Earth, he said finally. Her name is Subin. She is 7 years old. She has her mother's smile and my bad temper. Every night before I left on deployment, she would make me promise to come home safe. Every night, I would make that promise. He paused. When I saw Miru in that cage, I did not see a Pelori cub. I saw Subin. I saw every child I have ever known. I saw every child I have ever heard cry for their mother. His voice was rough with emotion. There was no choice to make. There was just what had to be done. Bami studied him carefully. Your people frighten us sometimes, Sergeant. Your capacity for violence. Your unpredictability. The way you can go from gentle to deadly in the blink of an eye. I know, but today, watching that video, we understood something important. She reached up and placed something around his neck. It was a small pendant made of woven metal and polished stone, carved with symbols that looked like stars and reaching hands. The same fire that makes humans terrifying in war is the same fire that makes a single man fight 12 soldiers with one arm. The same heart that can hate so deeply is the same heart that can love so fiercely. She stepped back and looked at him with eyes that glistened with unshed tears. The galaxy calls your species predators. They say you are dangerous, unpredictable, violent. And perhaps that is true. But we see now what you truly are. You are the ones who run toward the screaming, not away from it. You are the ones who hold the small and frightened things while everything burns around you. Han looked down at the pendant. He did not know what to say. He had never been good with words or ceremonies or emotions. A small hand tugged at his pants leg. He looked down and saw Miru standing beside him. Her face was still wet from crying with her mother, but she was smiling now. A small, shy, precious smile. Thank you, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. For the singing, it helped me not be scared. Han knelt down slowly, painfully, until he was at her eye level. He reached out and gently touched the small mark shaped like a star on her left ear. The mark her mother had described. The mark that proved she was real, was special, was loved. You were very brave, he told her. The bravest person I have ever met. Miru shook her head. You were brave. I just held on. Sometimes holding on is the bravest thing anyone can do. She looked at him for a long moment with her huge round eyes. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck in a hug. Han closed his eyes. He held her gently, careful not to hurt her, and let himself feel something he had not allowed himself to feel since the fighting ended. Peace. Around them, the crowd finally broke their silence. It started as a low sound, like wind moving through leaves, and grew into something that filled the air and shook the ground. It was not cheering. It was not applause. It was the sound of millions of voices saying the same word, over and over, in the Pelori language. The word meant guardian. It meant protector. It meant one who stands between darkness and light. It meant family. Han did not understand the word, but he understood the feeling behind it. He understood what it meant to be accepted, to be honored, to be welcomed by beings who owed him nothing but gave him everything. He stood up slowly, Miru's small paw still holding his fingers. Yuna came to stand beside them, her arms wrapped around her daughter, her eyes looking at Han with gratitude that words could not express. Elder Bami addressed the crowd one final time. Our children will grow up knowing this human's name, she said. They will know that when darkness came for us, when no one else would help, a human stood between our cubs and the void. They will know that the galaxy is not as cold as it sometimes seems. They will know that there is fire in the darkness, and sometimes that fire fights for the small and the scared and the forgotten. She looked at Han with something like love. They will know that they are not alone. Han looked out at the millions of faces watching him. He thought about Subin back on Earth, probably watching this on a screen, probably crying and smiling at the same time. He thought about all the battles he had fought, all the things he had done, all the choices he had made. This was the best one. This was the one that mattered. Thank you, he said quietly to Bami, for letting me help, for giving me the chance to do something that meant something. Bami smiled. Thank you for reminding us what the galaxy can be. What beings can be to each other when they choose to be something more than what they are. The two suns continued to rise, painting the sky in colors that had no names in any language. Somewhere in the crowd, someone started singing. It was a Pelori song, but the melody was familiar. It was the same melody Han had sung to Miru while the world burned around them. The singing spread through the crowd until millions of voices carried it up to the sky. Han closed his eyes and listened. He was home. Maybe not his home, but a home nonetheless. A place where he belonged. A place where what he had done mattered. That was enough. That was more than enough.